tying it together here and tying it together there and then coming up with this common thread. It's pretty simple. It's who, what, when, where, why. Check 1, 2. It's getting colder out. So that means my old man sweater comes out. I wear this thing almost daily when the weather gets a little chilly. Right now I'm working through a bunch of bigger ideas for the channel. I'm working on a documentary with my grandfather. He's been in and out of the hospital, and they've called hospice in, which is a bummer. And he's doing pretty good right now. And so I'm gonna make a documentary piece with him and ask him some questions about his life and about, he's like an avid gun guy, and my great uncle made these incredible guns from like the metal that he got during the war from these Navy war guns. And so I'm gonna tell that story of those guns, because they're like these handmade muskets there's 2 of them that he made, and my grandfather has them, and I just think it'd be a cool story to tell, and I think he would enjoy it. And so I'm working on that. I think with the documentary piece, I don't know if you saw, I made a little documentary hybrid / talking head with Audrey a couple weeks ago, and I'm really enjoying that medium, and so I'm going to explore that with my grandfather. But in the meantime, I thought I would just share with you a couple of projects that I'm working on at work, and then as well some of the things that I'm reading and thinking about. My friend Kristen sent me this really great quote, and I've been thinking about it a lot this week. It's from a guy by the name of Knox McCoy. He said, "More and more, I think that our generation is commodifying life as a series of content opportunities for social media, and then confusing this curation of ourselves for intimacy and vulnerability, when really it's neither." Then another text, she said, "This made me think of you. I think you're actively fighting this on Wednesday nights out in the garage." So at work, one of the things that we do, and one of the things that I think is brilliant about our agency, is that we are working on 2020 plans for next year right now. One of the biggest challenges that I have is that we do a lot of business to business marketing. You kind of have to go about it in a different way, and a lot of it's on LinkedIn. Social media is like a different game. So I've been tasked to come up with ideas on how to help companies communicate their ideas and build content that actually helps sales and isn't just content for the sake of content. And I came across this guy, Cal Fussman, on the podcast Below the Line. And if you haven't heard of Cal Fussman, like, you need to go look up this podcast, because it changed my life. And I'm not kidding. It was like, oh my gosh, I love this guy. I love what he has to say. And I'll link that in the description so you can check it out. But here's a couple of highlights from that.
If you're a company and you have a sales team and they're in one silo, and you have other silos that the sales team really isn't bumping into, and great stories are happening in these other silos, but they never get to the sales team, so the sales team can't use them to sell. And so it's really a matter of just finding these authentic stories and then making them available so that the company can know itself. How many times do you see companies sit down on, what's our mission statement? What's our values? And they try and write down their values without knowing their stories. But the values are in the stories. It's almost like you got to get the stories, look at the stories, and then say, these are our values. Look at that. This is what we do. Humans think in stories rather than in facts, numbers, or equations. And the simpler the story, the better.
I'm a lifelong student of asking questions ever since I got into filmmaking, because I learned pretty quickly that if I can ask the right questions, my editing will be easier. That's really where it came from, because I would go on these shoots and ask these really terrible questions, and then I'd get in the edit and be so frustrated. And so that's why I love guys like Cal Fussman, because he is a disciple to the art of asking questions. When I was listening to the podcast, I wrote down these notes. I said, I think that via longer format storytelling like podcasts or videos, people and companies can change the misconceptions that they deal with on a regular basis. If for nothing else, to get them telling their stories internally and getting it out into the world. I even think like me talking about this, like Thursday I have to present some of these ideas at work. And just talking about this and writing it here on camera is gonna help me so when I sit in the conference room and pitch it, I can pitch it with confidence because I've practiced. And so I've been telling companies like, start a podcast not to get 100,000 viewers. Start a podcast to articulate your ideas and practice talking about your ideas. And then within those, you're gonna find stories and you're gonna have ideas. Like even writing this and reading this, I'm like, oh, that's gonna work for customer X, Y, and Z. And so I love going in to a company and sort of taking their tangled ball of yarn and untangling it, snipping here, snipping there, tying it together here and tying it together there, and then coming up with this common thread that is their story. And the only way to do that is to ask questions. And it's pretty simple. It's who, what, when, where, why. So one of the other things that I'm really into is Ryan Holiday's stillness is the key. He is a mad genius when it comes to writing titles. 3 of his books that I give out the most are Obstacle is the Way, and Ego is the Enemy, and Stillness is the Key. I will warn you though, like if you read Stillness is the Key, you're gonna wanna throw your phone out the window and go meditate into a field. But I like what he has to say. It's about taking time essentially to be bored, to be still. I'm always at war with wanting to be still and wanting to move forward. In the book, he says, how different would the world look if people spent as much time listening to their conscience as they do to the chattering broadcasts? If they could just respond to the calls of their convictions as quickly as we answer the dings and rings of technology in our pockets. One of the other things I read this week was a really great article that my wife Sarah sent me. It's this article called The Third Self, and it's about Mary Oliver, who's a poet. The most regretful people on earth are those who felt the call to creative work, who felt their own creative power restive and uprising, and gave to it neither power nor time. I think it is so much easier to consume than to contribute. So much easier to consume in our relationships and not contribute in our relationships. It's so much easier in art to consume art than it is to contribute. So let's keep searching and let's keep finding. Let's contribute more than we consume. Let's keep making.